To most people, the original Xbox version of Half-Life 2 is nothing more than a punchline. A sick joke, a cruel abomination created with the sole purpose of being laughed at for having blurry textures every single day of its miserable existence. It looks god-awful, it plays even worse than it looks, and it runs at like 6 FPS on a good day. While it's definitely an impressive technological achievement, nobody ever really seems to talk about it outside of making fun of how bad it is, which is fair, but this Dogwater port has always been very special to me, and probably literally no one else. The original Xbox version of Half-Life 2 was not only my very first hands-on experience with the Source engine, it was also one of the very first video games I ever played, and I loved every second of it. Bad textures and low frame rate be damned. I didn't even know what frame rate was. I just knew that my mom's computer would never in a million years run Half-Life 2, but that my trusty old Xbox certainly would. A short time later, a brand spanking new video game called Garry's Mod began to flood YouTube.com, and to baby me, it looked like the coolest shit ever. It had physics, it had ragdolls, it had the guy from Halo.
Hey, what's up? I'm the guy from Halo.
It had basically everything from every video game ever made, and you could make dumbass little movies with it. And as if all of that wasn't already good enough, according to the internet, it was free. All you needed was your own copy of Half-Life 2. So I took my happy ass down to the local game store and asked the man working there how a fine young gentleman such as myself would go about putting Garry's Mod into my copy of the game. He looked at me like I was a freak, laughed, and said, it's not really how it works, you're probably gonna have to buy a computer. I distinctly remember arguing with the poor man and insisting that it was possible, and then I probably started crying or something, or yelling, or doing some kind of annoying-ass little kid thing when I realized he was right. But as it turns out, I wasn't exactly wrong about Garry's Mod being possible in the original Xbox. I was just very, very ahead of my time. In the past few years, people have somehow managed to mod the original Xbox version of Half-Life 2, which is something I didn't even think was possible. It started off pretty basic at first and wasn't much to look at unless you were a big nerd who was into that sort of thing, but recently it's become pretty sophisticated and even started to form its own little community that is pretty reminiscent of the early days of Garry's Mod. So I thought it'd be fun to take a look at the alternate good timeline where Garry's Mod was somehow put on the original Xbox and explore the weird-ass mods people have been making for what is undeniably the worst port of one of the greatest video games ever. So Half-Life 2 Xbox modding has been going on for roughly 4 years now, with tons of different people trying out weird stuff, building and releasing their own tools made specifically for Xbox Source Engine modding, and theorizing on just how far it can actually be taken. The project that interested me the most was one led by Billy Blueberry, who has been uploading their work to YouTube for quite some time now, with a pretty sizable portion of it being somewhat GMOD adjacent. There's crusty ports of old GMOD maps, random Half-Life 2 mods they managed to get running, and just a general wide range of experimentation by a whole team of people trying to figure out what works and what does not, all running on actual Xbox hardware. So I asked the team actually making this stuff to throw together a little sample build just to see how close we've actually gotten to Garry's Mod on the Xbox before I try out my own experiment. So without any further ado, I present to you what they have dubbed the Half-Life 2 Rat Lobber Special. From the menu, you probably wouldn't notice anything too weird about this copy of Half-Life 2, but booting up Chapter 1 is where shit gets real. Normally, clicking on this would take you directly to intro.bsp, which is the map where G-Man gets all in your face and starts doing ASMR tingles on you at 15 FPS. But in this version, it's been hacked to load this. A custom hub map the team put together for me with a bunch of buttons that can load up even more custom maps. This is kind of like the Trojan horse for everything this mod has to offer. I'm not even in the actual mod yet, but just seeing a clearly custom map with developer textures and everything on the Xbox version of Half-Life 2 and being able to no-clip around all willy-nilly is honestly cool as hell, and if I was still 8 years old, this would probably entertain me for weeks. Also, there's a baby over here. The baby. The first custom map they ported over is Free Space 06, a classic Garry's Mod map that is actually pretty period accurate, all things considered. If Gmod did somehow end up on the OG Xbox back in 2006, Free Space is probably one of the first maps they'd end up porting over. And it looks stupid beautiful running on the Xbox. Considering this is still retail Half-Life 2 and not Gary's mod, there's not a whole lot to do besides walk around and explore or get these really cool shots using no-clip that kind of look like a 2005 tech demo, but honestly that was enough to keep my little pea-brain entertained for a pretty good while. I've played just about every version of Gary's mod in existence, but this specifically has a really unique vibe that is straight up just not achievable on any PC version of the game, so I do have to thank this port for allowing me to experience what is possibly the rarest Source Engine vibe to ever exist. Next up is GM Construct, specifically the Gary's Mod 9 version of GM Construct. A very refined, classic, gentlemanly selection, if I don't say so myself. If you've watched a single one of my videos before, there's really not a lot to write home about here, but I was surprised to see that both the dark room and the white room are perfectly intact. There's also jeeps and airboats on this map, so for the first time I was able to drive around and wrestle with the Xbox's horrible-ass driving controls. Playing this made me appreciate just how much heavy lifting GMOD as a platform does when it comes to how fun these maps are to play on, and I was, for the first time ever on GM Construct, forced to sit around and come up with my own ways to have fun, like using the gun on the Jeep to draw a big rocket ship on the wall.
Hey man, it's me, George W. Bush from President. You may remember me as being the president, and I just had to chime in to say, holy fucking shit, that is a cool ass rocket ship, dude. Damn, that is fucking cool. Alright, bye.
Next is a map called GM Sitcom Apartment, which is pretty much just a tech demo for a sitcom-style TV show made entirely on the OG Xbox. I sat here and watched it for like 5 minutes just to see if anything might happen, but I'm pretty sure it just loops forever.
So as you can see, for the past 10 minutes or so, the white guy has been walking around the apartment while the Asian lady has been staring at the wall. And that is, I really like this show. This show is like awesome. This is probably the coolest show anyone's ever...
It's worth pointing out though that this is technically the first and only Half-Life 2 or GMOD machinima ever made on the original Xbox, so the bar has officially been set. The final map is called BS Track, and I'm not gonna lie, it confused the shit out of me. From what I can tell, it's a 20-year-old map from the very early days of Half-Life 2 modding, and I think it has something to do with doing sick-ass stunts. There's a bunch of custom vehicles to go along with it, and they can do things like lay down landmines and activate turbo boost mode, which is pretty weird to see achieved on the Xbox port of all things. Besides that though, I couldn't really tell you much more about the map, aside from there's a lot of roads and you can race down them with your Jeep and crash into stuff and die. The mapper did put weapons in the map though, so I was at least able to somewhat pretend like I was playing GMOD or something. Also, all of the tracks have stupid-ass difficulty names like bomb-ass and holy shit difficulty, but one of them is just labeled conservative. Who the hell made this map? Karl Rove? For a political consultant and former White House Deputy Chief of Staff during the Bush administration? So that's where the custom mod they put together for me ends. It was nice to peruse a selection of old maps and see them through a lens not many people have ever seen them through. But as impressive as it all is, that was kinda just modded Half-Life 2, and the title of this video is Gmod on the Xbox, with a little ugly-ass G-Man inside of an Xbox disc, and I pride myself on never misleading the viewer. And I promised you people Gary's Mod. So today, I'm going to do something nobody thought I would ever do, and make it my own damn self.
Gmod on the Xbox, Gmod on the Xbox, coming up next, watch Gmod on the Xbox.
Modding the Xbox version of Half-Life 2 is straight up nuts. I intentionally avoided getting into the details of how this all works earlier because frankly, I don't even understand it myself. The extent of what I knew at this point was that because you can't add models or add-ons into the game, making Gmod is theoretically impossible, but it would just be wrong if I didn't at least give it an honest try. So I decided it'd be best to start off small and try porting over a map. And no map felt more fitting for janky old Gary's Mod shit than good old GM Flatgrass. I grabbed the oldest version of the map I could find, ran it through this Xbox Source Engine converter thingy, and just like that, I now had Flatgrass on the Xbox. Which really is not much, but it was good to know I was at least capable of doing something. The biggest problem I was facing now was that I didn't have any weapons, and what is Gary's Mod without a large arsenal of stupid-ass weapons to play around with? So, I followed this 67-view tutorial on YouTube about how to inject console commands into this stupid game, and managed to bind SV Cheats 1 and Impulse 101 to the up D-pad button on my controller. Now, no matter what map I was in, I could press one button and have the entire Half-Life 2 arsenal at my disposal. Shout out to guys that make 67 view tutorials on YouTube. You people are the backbone of this country. I was feeling pretty invigorated by this, so I went one step further and made it so that I would always spawn in with the supercharged version of the gravity gun, which is probably as close to a GMOD phys gun as I can get. And I also cranked up the view model FOV of all the weapons just because I can, and because it looks kinda cool. From here, I went all out and made every button on my controller do something that was sort of GMOD-like. Up D-pad now spawned a classic explosive barrel, left D-pad spawned a big old bathtub, the white button spawned in a Metro Cop that I could pick up with a super gravity gun and toss around like an asshole, the black button spawned in G-Man and also a chair, and also activated no clip because at this point I was running out of buttons, the right stick spawned in 2 Jeeps, even though it's only supposed to spawn in 1, and last but certainly not least, hitting right on the D-pad will spawn in a citizen NPC and then instantly kill him, because for some reason the create ragdoll command just crashes on the Xbox version, so that's as good as it's gonna get. I guess I can't really pose these ragdolls like in Gary's mod, but I can blow them around all epic style and make this Metro Cop bump against this guy in a way that I would probably find pretty funny if I was still 15. I was now 10 button presses away from turning GM Flatgrass into a laggy mishmash of random-ass source engine assets, and if that isn't in the spirit of Gary and his modification, I don't know what is. The game was clearly struggling at this point, and I could basically see the engine breaking down before me, but I'm what you might consider a demented person, and seeing that only made me want to push it even further. So I gave it its first real challenge. A map that I was genuinely surprised I even got working on the Xbox. A port of Destructible House, a true Gary's Mod classic from 2012 that features a destructible house. Just turning around to look at the house brought the FPS down from 30 to about 15, and I had a strange feeling that blowing it up was either going to bring it down to 5 or crash the game entirely. But being a man of science, I knew the only option I really had here was to fill the house up with as many explosive barrels as I could, and also throw in some Metro Cop NPCs just to make it more epic. And then I blew that shit up dope style. The Xbox actually handled itself pretty well considering how many physics interactions, explosions, and deaths were happening on screen. I mean, it did go down to like 5 FPS at some points, but I wasn't even expecting this map to run, so the fact that you can blow up every single piece of the house without the game crashing is genuinely impressive. Doing this was probably the closest I've gotten to recreating the feeling of being 11 and spawning a bunch of TNT blocks in Minecraft to lag my computer, so I would consider this experiment to be a massive success. Following this, my hubris was at an all-time high, and it really felt like I could port any GMOD map I wanted to. If you'd asked me what limitations the Xbox has when it comes to maps, at this point, I would have smiled like a jackass and said none. But as I worked on porting over the next map, I learned a valuable lesson in humility. GM Big City. It's one of the biggest GMOD maps to ever do it, it's damn near 20 years old and still impressive by modern standards, and it's maybe the most iconic map in the game that isn't Construct. And it just felt wrong to remake Gary's mod without having it in some form. So I edited the map a little bit to improve the odds that it would even run on the Xbox, and after waiting 29 hours, the map did not compile. At this point, I realized that Big City was probably just too damn big for the Xbox, and the only way it would run would be by chopping off half the map or something. And just as I had given up on the Xbox Big City dream, I noticed that while the compiler never finished even after running for almost 30 hours, it did still get far enough to spit out an incomplete map file. And being the curious little jester that I am, I figured there'd be no harm in just trying to boot it up. And by the grace of God, the map somehow loaded. The game was very clearly breaking apart at the seams, the sky was disgustingly pink, all of the textures were wrong, and depending on where you looked, the game would drop down to around 4 FPS. But despite all of that, GM Big City was running on the original Xbox. It's maybe the worst looking and worst performing version of Big City in all of history, but it is here. I don't really know what was up with all this. I guess depending on where you look, random textures from the map will just stretch all over your screen. I've played around with the Source Engine for longer than any human being ever should, and I have never, ever seen it bug out like this. If you look at too much of the map at once, the Xbox will run out of RAM, I think, and stop rendering your view model textures, which results in this really weird glitch where your hands and weapons just become these abstract, shiny blob things. I decided to go on whatever the opposite of a relaxing drive is and just take in the full scale of this map for the first time in years. Big City's always seemed big, but when you have it on hardware that can barely even run default Half-Life 2, it really makes you appreciate just how huge it actually is. But as fun as that was, I was getting sidetracked from the original point, which was making this game as much like Gary's Mod as I can. So I didn't have time to stay on Big City for much longer, and honestly, I did not want to. The next map was one of the most important additions to this entire thing, and it is 100% the exact moment this game really started feeling like Gary's Mod. This is Fizz Temple, running on the PC version of GMOD. It's an extremely classic map that's been around for a while, and while it looks pretty unassuming, it is what you might consider a technical marvel. The whole entire map is physics-based, and unlike Destructible House, everything interacts with everything else. This building isn't just floating in the air, it's actually supporting its own weight, and interacting with any part of it will affect the entire thing. And here's Fizz Temple running on my Xbox version of Gary's Mod. Even when nothing is happening on screen, the game sits at a cool 5 FPS. There are tons of error models everywhere, which is honestly kinda nuts to see on an Xbox, and I had to replace basically every texture in the map with a default Half-Life 2 texture, or the game just straight up would not load. And while seeing a real-time, large-scale physics simulation actually work on an Xbox is cool, that is not the reason I'm showing you this map. Fizz Temple has this weird feature where you can spawn in little disasters that destroy the map in crazy ways. These can be things like a nuke, a head crab shell, space lasers, basically anything. And it was pretty trivial to get them all working on the Xbox since they mostly use default Half-Life 2 assets anyways. I even managed to record some beautiful footage of the first ever GMOD nuke to run on an Xbox. But easily the coolest disaster it has is this one where a giant domo comes up from the mountainside and starts using his laser eyes to destroy the map. It's cute, it's effective, and most importantly, it uses a custom texture. So on the Xbox version, it's just a big missing texture because believe it or not, Half-Life 2 did not ship with a Domo PNG on the disc. So thus started one of the hardest and most important challenges I had to face during this entire thing. I needed to find a way to somehow get Domo on the Xbox. I spent an entire day trying to figure out how exactly you get custom textures to work on the Xbox. I had to learn what an XTF is, because apparently the Xbox version uses a proprietary texture format that no other version of Half-Life 2 uses. I had to figure out how to make an XTF, and I had to figure out how to put them in the game. I ended up staring at random GitHub pages and going through forums no one's ever heard of for what felt like forever, until eventually, I achieved something beautiful. Seeing Domo's head peeking over that terrible looking ass mountain and then seeing him start lasering the map while the game ran at 2 FPS was genuinely an amazing moment. It was such a stupid thing and was literally just one texture, but that one texture represented a whole lot. And now that I was armed with the arcane knowledge of how to put custom assets on the Xbox, the sky really felt like the limit. So I decided I would head back to Construct and use my newfound abilities to start going crazy style. The first thing I wanted to do was get something resembling a Gary's Mod add-on into the game. I don't think anyone's figured out how to get custom models into the Xbox just yet, but I knew that with some clever trickery, I could get something. The very first GMOD add-on ever made, which I've for some reason mentioned like 3 videos in a row now, was called Gary's Mod on Wheels, and it basically just reskinned the default Jeep into a bunch of different real-life cars. And while I can't port it over directly, I could make something that was more or less like it. So I opened the map up in Hammer, grabbed a few brushed-based cars from the Half-Life 2 beta leak thing, put them on top of the default Jeep, and just like that, I had a beautiful selection of 3 working custom vehicles. The first one was this big old bus, and while it wasn't anything special, it was cool to finally have a proper custom vehicle add-on. It even had a working interior. The second car is honestly my favorite one because it not only looks dope as freak, but I even managed to get it running in third person. Driving this thing around and running over Metro Cops is so damn fun, and it just feels so wrong to be driving around a custom third-person vehicle on the Xbox version of Half-Life 2. I feel like this is the point where the game really became more Gary's Mod than it was Half-Life. The car also made me discover a neat little fact, which is that if you try to pick up a vehicle with a super fizz gun on the Xbox port, the entire game shits itself insanely hard and crashes. I guess they just didn't think anyone would ever be able to do that. The third car is a pickup truck, and it honestly sucks ass, and I think I messed it up or something when I made it, so blarg. Next, I wanted to try getting custom weapon textures working, because some of my earliest GMOD memories were downloading really ugly skins for all of my guns off of random modding websites. I started off small by reskinning the Super Gravity Gun to use the Fizz Gun texture from Garry's Mod 9. This doesn't actually change all that much, but it does add a cool little smiley face to the bottom left corner of the gun, and it's what my hood would call insanely classic. I then went ahead and swapped Gordon's hands out with this old Rebel Hands mod from Game Banana just to further sell the downloading a bunch of random shit into my Gmod installation vibe. From here I started going nuts and replaced basically every weapon in the game with a crusty old skin from Game Banana, and by the end of it I had a whole arsenal of weapons that were very visibly designed by a teenager in the year 2008. This really elevated the Gmod look of this whole thing, and I figured all I had to do now was add some custom NPCs into the mix. I started off first by porting over the classic Casual Citizens mod, which turned the citizens from downtrodden, oppressed people to cool-ass guys in sick-ass clothes. You may even perhaps recognize this Asian man's outfit as being worn by a certain Garry's Mod YouTuber. Considering the Metro Cop was the NPC I was spawning the most throughout this entire thing, I decided I'd give him a custom skin too. There are tons of custom Metro Cop skins on Game Banana, but my friend Richter told me that this tribal Metro Cop skin was the one he used as a kid, and he said that it would be, quote, epic nostalgia balls if I put it in the video, so here it is, buddy. I did a little more tinkering just to make the game look as Gmod-y as I could, like installing a really bad skin for the G-Man that gives him a white suit, and with that I think I had a pretty damn good Half-Life 2 mod that was now pretty much done. It definitely wasn't Garry's Mod, technically, but it also clearly was not Half-Life 2 either. At this point, the game was indistinguishable from earlier Gmod versions like Gmod 9, and literally the only thing missing was a proper Fizz gun, but considering we don't have the source code for the Xbox port, that's probably never gonna happen. To really cement this as a proper standalone video game, I changed the default Half-Life 2 menu out for a custom Garry's Mod Xbox main menu, which is a pretty small thing, but something that I think makes it feel a lot more like a cohesive product that would have actually been released in 2006 or something. From here I just started going nuts and began porting over as many old maps as I could to really recreate that classic Gmod experience of getting bored and loading your game up with like 100 random ass maps. Each of them brought something unique to the table, and I think the variety in maps really helped make it feel more like Gmod than Half-Life 2. I couldn't actually construct anything in-game like in Garry's Mod unless I wanted to stack bathtubs on top of each other, but being forced to use the map editor for honestly the first time in my life and come up with ways to reinvent Gmod mechanics as a series of shitty entities and map logic was honestly pretty damn fun, and something people don't even really do these days, ironically because Garry's Mod rendered this level of source engine jank totally obsolete. And the more I played around and tinkered on these random ass maps, the more it really felt like I was playing a totally different standalone video game. It became hard to even comprehend the fact that the Half-Life 2 campaign once existed on this disc, and the longer I played, the less fitting that old Half-Life 2 box art seemed to be. So I did what literally anyone would do and got a custom game case and disc professionally printed. When I designed it, I tried my best to make it look as authentically 2006 as possible, and I think I did a pretty damn good job, not to brag too much here. The disc isn't as nice looking as the box is, but it does actually work, like the game is actually on the disc, so I could just leave this in a Goodwill somewhere and not upload this video and just see what happens. Also, I just want to say for the record that this gamer gunk all over the box is not my gamer gunk, okay? That is somebody else's 2005 gamer gunk, and I'm not about to take credit for it. And with all of that said and done, I could finally, after working on this video for literal months, say that I put Garry's Mod on the original Xbox.
Let's go! It's not easy picking a name for yourself. Where do you draw the line? I never thought I'd be in this far. Have some fun and never chase operating blood. Try not to miss me when I'm gone. I sold my soul to the open road.
I feel like I say this at the end of everything I make now, but this was bar none the most fun I've ever had making a video on this channel. It was insanely hard, which is why this video took so long to come out, and I did you guys the favor of removing literal hours of me trying to figure out how the hell to use the tools that were necessary to make this possible. Making this video felt like one of those pregnancy shock things that were like shows the father how much pregnancy hurts or whatever. It felt like that, but for Gary. Like I felt really bad for Gary that he had to make Gary's mod. It was probably really, really hard if my experience is anything to go off of. But I would do it all over again in a heartbeat if I had to. It was such a fun experience to be treading ground that no one has ever really tread before, and by the end of it, I not only got to right a childhood wrong from over 15 years ago, I also got to experience a version of my favorite video game of all time that nobody has ever really gotten to experience before. It was janky as hell, it lacked a lot of features, it crashed all the time and took forever to make, but through it all, I was able to prove that random GameStop employee wrong and take comfort in knowing that I was factually correct. You can put Gary's mod into your copy of Half-Life 2 for the Xbox, you just have to wait 15 years and waste months of your time doing it. I also want to say that this whole thing was definitely not a one-man operation. There are so many people that helped me out along the way, so it would be wrong to not take the time to thank them. Thank you very much to Billy Blueberry for giving me the modded Half-Life 2 build that started all of this. Thank you to every single smart guy who made tools for modding the Xbox version of Half-Life 2. Thank you to Felipe for being the only reason I got custom textures working on this damn thing. And thank you especially to my dear British friend Fagardo, who helped me literally every step of the way on this video, and who I would not have been able to make it without. So, this has been my YouTube video, where a grown man spends multiple months of his time making Gary's mod for the Xbox because of a misunderstanding he had when he was 8 years old. Thank you very much for watching. I've been Ratlobber. Peace.
Hey y'all, once again, this is me, Ratlobber. This is Ratlobber, the greatest Gary's mod YouTuber to ever do it. I hope y'all enjoyed that video. It was about GMOD on the Xbox. How crazy is that? How did they get GMOD on the Xbox? That's some crazy type crap. Anyways, that was definitely a certified classic. It was so good I might watch it a second time. Make sure y'all comment down below and tell me what your favorite flavor of Lay's potato chips is. Personally, mine is honey mustard. That's just me. Alright, peace y'all. Ratlobber out.